At 2:17 a.m. on the 4th of January 25, every screen in my flat turned on by itself. The television, long unplugged, flickered to life. My phone lit up with no notification. Even the old laptop I hadn't touched in years hummed awake. On all of them, the same message appeared in stark white letters on a black background. You asked for true stories. We're still here. Tried to laugh it off. Lack of sleep. Too much caffeine. The kind of paranoia you get when you make a living collecting true horror stories for an audience that's hungry for fear. But then the message changed. Start with the first one. My inbox chimed. That was how the year began. And by the time it ended, 10 stories would surface, each one verified, each one dismissed by authorities as coincidence or hysteria, and each one leaving behind something physical, something that should not exist if they were only stories. This is a single account of what happened when those 10 horrors bled into one another, and why 2025 is the year no one who is paying attention will ever forget. The first file arrived without a sender, no subject line. Just a single audio recording labeled A North York Moors, 3/1/2025. I pressed play. At first it was only wind rolling endlessly across open land. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, followed by a man whispering, his voice brittle with fear. He said he was lost, though the moors were familiar ground to him. He had walked them since childhood. He said the stars had changed position, and the path no longer led where it should. He laughed nervously, then stopped mid-breath. Something else began to breathe with him. Not close, not far, just everywhere. He said it sounded like wet cloth being dragged across stone. He said he could smell iron. He said his torch kept pointing itself away from the sound, no matter how tightly he gripped it. And then very calmly, he said, "It's wearing my face." The recording ended with a scream that cut off too cleanly to be human. I traced the coordinates embedded in the file. The police report existed. A missing hiker. Search teams found his boots neatly placed beside a standing stone that predated Roman Britain. No footprints leading away. No blood. No body. The case was quietly closed. That night I dreamt of the moors, though I'd never been there. In the dream, I stood at the stone and watched myself walk out of the fog, smiling with a mouth that bent the wrong way. The second story arrived 3 days later, this time as CCTV footage from a care home in Kent. The timestamp read 14 February 2025, Valentine's Day. An elderly woman sat bolt upright in her bed at exactly 3:33 a.m. She stared into the corner of her room and began nodding, as if listening to someone speak. The night nurse later claimed the woman hadn't spoken a word in over 6 years due to advanced dementia. On the footage, her lips moved. She reached out and took something's hand. The mattress dipped. The woman smiled and said, "Clear as day, you kept your promise." At 3:34, the heart monitor flatlined. When staff entered the room, there were 2 sets of footprints on the floor. One led to the bed. One led back into the corner and ended mid-step, as though whoever, or whatever, had simply stepped out of reality. I paused my work. I told myself to stop. But the stories kept coming, as if refusing to be ignored. The third involved a live stream from Manchester that went viral for all the wrong reasons. A group of urban explorers entered a condemned Victorian tunnel beneath the city, joking and daring each other forward. Their torches picked up old brickwork, water dripping like a slow heartbeat. Halfway through the stream, the chat exploded. Viewers claimed they could hear children singing. The explorers laughed it off until one of them joined in. A grown man, eyes glazed, began singing a nursery rhyme that none of them recognized. His voice echoed strangely, as though layered over itself. When they tried to stop him, he turned, smiling, and said, "We've been waiting underground since the fire." The stream cut out. The tunnel collapsed 2 hours later. No bodies were recovered. Weeks afterwards, parents in nearby estates reported their children humming the same rhyme in their sleep, always ending with the same whispered line. The dig deeper. By March, I wasn't sleeping. Every story left behind a residue. A sound, a smell, a sense that something was watching, not just me, but anyone who read too closely. The fourth story came from a primary school in Birmingham. A teacher noticed that one child had started drawing the same picture every day. A tall figure with no eyes standing behind the playground fence. When asked, the child said it was the teacher who teaches at night. CCTV was checked. Every night at exactly 1:11 a.m., a shadow appeared in the playground. It moved like a person but stretched wrong, limbs too long, head brushing the top of the fence. It stood there until morning, facing the classrooms. The school was closed. The footage leaked. The shadow still appears on the camera feed, even though the building has been demolished. I began to realize something then. These weren't isolated events. Each story had a time, a pattern. They were getting closer together, closer to me. The fifth horror arrived as a handwritten letter delivered to my door despite no return address. The paper smelled faintly of mold and seawater. It described a lighthouse keeper off the coast of Cornwall who had begun logging extra ships in his records, vessels no one else could see. He wrote of hearing foghorns on clear nights and of faces pressed against the glass at the top of the tower. His final entry read, "They're signaling back now." They know my name. The lighthouse burned down 2 days later. The keeper's body was never found. When divers explored the wreckage, they discovered the foghorn mechanism still running, deep underwater, blasting a sound no human lung could produce. By the sixth story, I noticed the messages on my screens had changed. Halfway. Do you remember US yet? Story 6 came from London Underground maintenance logs. Engineers reported a driverless train running on a closed line at night. Lights on, passengers visible through the windows. When approached, the train vanished into a tunnel that hadn't existed since the Blitz. Later that month, commuters reported seeing unfamiliar stations flash by, names scratched out on maps decades ago. Anyone who disembarked was never seen again. Though their Oyster cards continued to register daily travel, I checked my own card history. There was a journey I didn't remember taking. The seventh story broke something in me. It involved a home security system in Leeds. A family installed cameras after their dog began growling at the hallway every night. The footage showed nothing at first. Then, one night, the hallway appeared longer than it should have been. The walls stretched back into darkness. A door appeared where there had never been one. 2 a.m. Fray. It opened. The thing that stepped out wore the father's face but moved like it was learning how joints worked for the first time. It stood there, staring directly into the camera, and whispered, "He said you'd believe." The family vanished the next day. The house remains, but estate agents refuse to enter. The hallway now measures 12 meters longer than the building's external dimensions allow. By August, people started contacting me directly, begging me to stop, claiming that after reading the stories, they'd begun seeing things. Figures at the edge of mirrors, reflections that smiled when they didn't, voices that spoke only when no one else was around. The eighth story arrived as a voicemail. A woman sobbing, saying she'd woken up to find her phone full of photos taken while she slept. Each image showed her closer to the ceiling, as though gravity had loosened its grip. In the final photo, she was pressed flat against it, eyes open, mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. Police found her body the next morning, folded impossibly into the corner of her bedroom ceiling. The ninth was the simplest, and perhaps the worst. A social media trend swept the UK briefly. People posting about an extra person in their house. A man who stood in the background of family photos. A woman reflected in the microwave door. Always smiling. Always just out of focus. The trend ended when people realized the extra person began to appear in older photos too. Wedding albums, childhood snapshots, hospital scans. As if they'd always been there. And then came the 10th story. It wasn't sent to me. I lived it on the 31st of December 2025. At exactly 11:59 p.m. Every screen in my flat turned on again. The same black background, the same white text. "Thank you for telling them. Now they'll remember." Behind the text, I could see my own reflection, standing in the room, watching the screen. Except I wasn't alone. There were shapes behind me. Tall, patient. Tall, patient. Familiar. The message faded, replaced by a live feed of my flat from the ceiling corner. I watched myself turn slowly, eyes widening as I finally saw what had been following the stories from the beginning. From the screen, I raised my hand. From the room, I didn't. That was when I understood the truth behind all 10 horrors. They weren't hauntings. They weren't coincidences. They were reminders. Things that had slipped through cracks humanity forgot existed. Stories weren't spreading them. Stories were anchoring them. Stories were anchoring them. At midnight, the screen went dark. The shapes stepped closer. And somewhere, in thousands of homes across the UK, people felt the sudden certainty that something old had just been welcomed back properly. If you're reading this now, if these stories feel too vivid, too close, Check your reflection. If it smiles before you do, then 2025 wasn't the end of the story. It was the year it found you.